Yeah. Okay, we're just about ready to get started. We done eating for the most part. If you're still eating, that's okay. And
Okay.
you're new, so I'll let you know. You can get leftovers if you want. Don't worry about getting up or asking someone to get you food while I'm speaking or anything like that. It's not going to be disruptive. It's fine. This is much more discussion-based and dynamic. So I expect distractions, especially since we don't have a children's ministry running here. Okay. So I actually have a presentation for this week, but before I get that started and while the projector's loading up, does anybody have any prayer requests or things that they need in their life? This is a church. I want us to be able to help each other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pray that my second mammogram and ultrasound, the results this time turns out good.
Wait, sorry, say that again, your results.
Hopefully this second results of my mammogram and my ultrasound turns out better than the first results.
Oh, no. What's going on, or do you not want to talk about that?
They don't know if it's cancer or not. That's why I gotta do
So
a
some
second.
kind of mass.
Yeah, they have to do a second mammogram and an ultrasound.
Wow. Are they planning on biopsy or anything like that?
No, you're gonna do the ultrasound and the mammogram first.
Okay, sure, absolutely. Okay, so let's please keep Haley in mind, when we pray. Anybody else?
I guess just for family in general.
Family in general?
Yeah. For my husband.
For your husband?
This would be the second time I'll be dealing with cancer.
Okay. Really?
The first one we caught in stage 1, and I had to have a total hysterectomy and found out it was stage 1 cancer.
Wow. Well, at least they're that's
That was
rough, though.
lucky. That was lucky. They ran other tests and they said there was no more signs of cancer, but
Yeah, okay. All right, I'm sorry you're dealing with that. It's rough.
yeah. Especially losing my brother to stage 4 cancer December 21st, 2 years ago.
Jeez, I'm sorry. Yeah, that's always hard. Okay, yeah, well, thank you for sharing. We'll definitely keep it in mind. Okay, cool. So, like we've established the last few weeks, this is a church that recognizes and follows and believes that the Torah still applies. And so one of the things about establishing that and making the argument for it, which I'm going to spend the next couple of weeks doing, is first identifying what is Israel. I believe that's very important for understanding why the Torah still applies to us. Okay, so let me see if I can. Okay. So the identity of Israel. So when Jesus was on earth doing his ministry, these are two passages that I want to bring up. How he talks about how he is supposed to go to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. And this is significant because Israel at this time was not a country. And Israel had been dissolved. There was Judea and Galilee. There was regions under the Roman Empire, but Israel itself was not a country. He was talking about the people that were once recognized as Israel. And also, we know that Jacob was called Israel a long time ago, before the country was ever established. He was the start of it. And so, we also know that
Jacob was called Israel?
Jacob was called Israel. His name was changed to Israel when God established the covenant that the people would come through him. Find that in early Genesis. Yeah. Yeah, and when him and his family, his 12 sons and their servants and his grandsons, when they all came to Egypt to stay in the land of Goshen, they were called Israel at that time, just as a collective. And also Israel, the law was given to Israel as they wandered the wilderness, but they were going to the land of Canaan. They were going to a country, Israel. So Israel has always been a people. It has not been a country or a land. Everything that's called Israel after that is named after Jacob and the subsequent people. So the question about the people of Israel is how does it relate to the believers, right? And a little mix up here. Before we continue on, I think it's really important to define 3 different terms because people get these terms mixed up all the time. The difference between Hebrews, Israelites, and Jews. Anybody want to define one of these?
Side. Jews are from the tribe of Judah, or the lower portion of Judea.
Yeah. So Jews are descendants of Judah The guy Judah, Israelites are descendants of Jacob specifically, and Hebrews are descendants of Abraham. So you have men like Esau, right? He's not an Israelite, he's not a Jew, but he is a Hebrew. So it just depends on who you're descended from. And then Gentiles are kind of funny. It's anything that's a non-Jew. So it includes everyone else, including Hebrews and Israelites. And like Sai was saying, Jews, the term for Jews had changed after a while because you had descendants of the tribe of Judah, but then after the kingdom divided into the countries of Israel and Judah, the country of Judah was actually made up of Jews, Benjamites, and parts of Levi. So they all kind of got collectively known as Jews after a certain point. Okay, so how does Israel relate to Gentile believers? There's 3 schools of thought on this typically. Thought 1 is that Gentile believers replace Israel as Yahweh's chosen people. This is one I see quite a bit. And then there's thought 2, Gentile believers and Israel are both chosen, but they're individual and separate. Different rules, different structures of thought, different expectations from God. And then there's thought 3, that Gentile believers have integrated into Israel to become one people. Okay, is that clear? Has anybody else heard a really prominent different thought than that? Those are the ones I did. Okay. Yeah, I just want to let you know this is, I don't know how much you looked at our website or any previous videos or anything.
I watched your 2 videos on
Oh, you watched
YouTube.
it, so you know it's kind of discussion. Yeah, okay, awesome, good. So yeah, if you have any questions or anything, just feel free to jump in. So, all right, those are 3 schools of thought. And we're going to talk about all 3 of them kind of at once. So, first let's go to what Paul says and what Paul says about the relationship between Gentile believers and Israel. So we don't have to read this whole thing, you can if you want. It's up here. This is primarily about circumcision, and when Paul is talking about the circumcision versus the uncircumcision, he's talking about 2 groups of people, the circumcised being the Jews, the non-circumcised being Gentiles. And if we come down here near the very bottom, this is the most important thing about it. He says, "For no one is a Jew who is merely one outwardly, nor is circumcision outward and physical, but a Jew is one inwardly, and circumcision is a matter of the heart, by the Spirit, not the letter. His praise is not from man, but from God." Who knows what circumcision of the heart is? You can if you want, just go ahead.
Oh, you want us to say it?
Sure, yeah.
So circumcision of the heart is having a heart that is basically you're believing in Yahweh God.
Yeah, dedicated to Yahweh, keeping
Yeah.
his covenant.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. The agreement to keep the covenant. So, by Paul's standard here, in this section, there is no physical bloodline separation between at least a Jew and a non-believer. So let's see what else he had to say. Up here in Colossians, you can read, again, read as much as you want of that, but here there is not Greek and Jew, circumcised and uncircumcised, barbarian, Scythian, slave-free, but Christ is all and in all. Another example of being one people. There's not distinction. And then Galatians, he says, "And if you are Christ, you are Abraham's offspring, heirs according to promise." That gets a little more specific and defines us at the very least Hebrews, spiritually, descendants of Abraham. And then this is a long one. Does anybody want to read this? Sam, you want to read it?
Sure.
Go for it.
But if some of the branches were broken off, and you, although a wild olive shoot, were grafted in among the others, and now share in the nourishing root of the olive tree.
Oh, quick note, he is speaking to Gentiles. Romans is a letter written to Gentiles.
Do not be arrogant towards the branches. If you are, remember it is not you who support the root, but the root that supports you. Then you will say, branches were broken off so that I might be grafted in. That is true. They were broken off because of their unbelief, but you stand fast through faith. So you do not become proud, but fear. For if God did not spare the natural branches, neither will he spare you. Note then the kindness and the severity of God. Severity towards those who have fallen, but God's kindness to you. Provided you continue in his kindness. Provided you continue in his kindness. Otherwise you too will be cut off. And even they, if they do not continue in their belief, will be grafted in. For God has the power to graft them in again.
Yeah. So, thank you, Sam. Yeah, so parts of Israel and Judah were broken off, parts of non-Gentiles, or Gentiles were grafted in. Everyone's become part of Israel, so long as you believe. Okay, so that's what Paul had to say about it. And before we get to that, I'm going to change gears a little bit. I got a question. What is the need of salvation? Like, why do we need salvation? Period. Anyway.
Why do we need salvation?
Yeah, what do we need salvation for?
Because we're all sinners.
Right, okay. Because we
Fall
sin.
short of the glory of God.
Right, because of sin. Okay, what is sin?
Disobedience.
Disobedience of what?
God's laws. And
Yeah, it's breaking God's law, right? And who was the law given to? Who was the law given to?
Specifically to his chosen people, but for all mankind.
Well, right, you can make that argument of the verses, right? But when it was given, when they're in the wilderness, who was it given to specifically? Moses. It was given to Moses to give to Israel, right? The law was given to Israel. And you're right, it was eventually meant for all mankind. But the argument that I would make here is that if we're not part of Israel, and if we weren't part of Israel, then how can we be subject to sin and salvation? Why do we need salvation? Because if we're not part of Israel and we're not part of the law, then we can't break the law. And therefore we can't sin. And so we don't need Jesus' salvation if we're not part of Israel. Like, I mean, because, you know, somebody in a different country can't break our rules here. You know, if we're not part of it. Is that making sense? Okay. But we do know that salvation was being brought to the Gentiles. Oh man. Oh yeah, okay, here's sorry, I have this verse here that talks about the covenant specifically being given to the Israelites. If you see here near the middle of it, it says, "Now therefore, if you will indeed obey my voice and keep my covenant, you shall be my treasured possession among all peoples, for all the earth is mine, and you shall be to me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. These are the words that you shall speak to the people of Israel." This is Yahweh speaking to Moses. So, but we know that Paul said here in Rome, he said, "Therefore let it be known to you that the salvation of God has been sent to the Gentiles, and they will listen." So if the Gentiles did have need of salvation and didn't have need of Christ, then obviously the law applied to us even before Jesus came around, somehow, to some extent. Because a lot of people seem to think that this idea of us being grafted in happened when Jesus came, when he died and he resurrected and he was our sacrifice. So let's see what Jesus said. These are just verses to establish that, in fact, he did come to save the Gentiles. Because he specifically said that he came to save the house of Israel, right? But he spent a lot of time with Gentiles. A lot of time. The demon-possessed man was a Gentile that he led out. That's Legion. And also the centurion and the Samaritan. And this is what Jesus had to say about Gentiles. He said, "Now is the judgment of this world. Now will the rulers of this world be cast out. And when I am lifted up from the earth, I will draw all people to myself." All people. Not just Israel. Down here, he is quoting Isaiah. And he said, and he was teaching and saying to them, "Is it not written, my house shall be called a house of prayer for all the nations?" And then this one's long, but this is the centurion story that I was talking about. And what I specifically want to point out here is when Jesus says, "Truly I tell you, with no one in Israel have I found such faith. I tell you, many will come from the east and from the west." That's outside of Israel, from the east and the west, Gentiles. "And they will recline with Abraham and Isaac and Jacob in the kingdom of heaven, while the sons of the kingdom," that's Israel, the Jews, "will be thrown into the outer darkness. In that place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth." So, Jesus came primarily to spread his ministry to the lost sheep of Israel, but the Gentiles were not excluded from salvation. Any questions so far? Okay.
So whoever's not in the house of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, they're thrown away?
Well, he's specifically talking about faith. So if they don't have faith in the Messiah, which is Jesus, then yes, they're thrown. So it's not all of them. It's just, that's why with the, when Paul was talking about the tree being grafted in, he said some of them were broken off. Those are the ones that don't have faith.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's not like, oh, we replaced them as a chosen people that have been brought together.
Okay.
I take that he's pointing out that it's not just because you're a relative,
Right.
part of the actual blood family.
I'll talk about that quite a bit, yeah. But yes, yeah, absolutely, yeah, because of his faith, yeah. Before that, truly no one in Israel have I found such faith. He's talking to a Gentile. Not just a Gentile, a centurion, a Roman soldier. Like that's, I bet a lot of Israelites felt that it was a slap in the face, him saying that. Anyways, I think this is probably the greatest argument for Jesus declaring salvation to Gentiles. And something you'll see when I use a lot of scripture to try to make a single point, because I don't want to say I'm taking things out of context. So this is all up here. This is the parable that Jesus said about the wedding feast with the guests. So there were invited guests, and there's a key here that you can basically follow. The king that's holding this feast for his son, that's Yahweh, the son is Jesus. The servants he sends out are the prophets, and the invited guests, of course, is Israel and Judah. And the invited people kept killing the servants and treating them shamefully and killed them. The king was angry and sent his troops and destroyed those murderers and burned their city. And then, blah, 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 he says, go therefore to the main roads and invite to the wedding feast as many as you can find. Anyone and everyone who's there and willing to come, which is non-Israel. That's us. That's anyone, Gentiles. And so salvation will be brought to them. Okay? Any questions?
I think it's important to note on that verse, the last part there.
I know that's kind of a different.
Huh?
That's kind of a different subject than.
Okay.
Yeah, no, you're right. I will talk about this
Okay.
plenty in the future. But yeah, because I love this parable. It's a great parable. You're talking about the wedding garment.
Yeah.
Yeah, being cast out. Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. Definitely has a lot of implications. Okay. So I brought this up here because, again, like I said, most people seem to think that it was when Jesus came that the change occurred, that the law was only for Israel. Israel was God's chosen people, and that was it, the bloodline descended from Jacob. Like, ta-da, that's the end. And then Jesus changed it. But I want to show all the verses that I can, just a bunch of verses showing what God said about non-Israel, non-bloodline people, and how they related to him and to Israel themselves. So we have this, Exodus 23:12, 6 days you shall do your work, but on the seventh you shall rest, that your ox and your donkey may have rest, and the son of your servant woman and the alien may be refreshed. So at the very least, the law regarding the Sabbath applied not just to blood descendants of Jacob, but anyone who was amongst them. Okay, same thing with Leviticus 16. It's the same idea, except this is talking about the Day of Atonement, which is a special appointed time. Also applies to the stranger who sojourns among you. Sojourns is a temporary stay, or a foreigner. Yeah. When a stranger sojourns with you in the land, you shall do him no wrong. You shall treat the stranger who sojourns with you as a native among you, and you shall love him as yourself, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt. I am the Lord your God. So, had to be treated the same doesn't necessarily mean they are the same, but they had to be treated the same, no matter what. You shall have the same rule for the sojourner and for the native, for I am the Lord your God. So the law, the entire law applied to the blood descendants of Israel and to anyone who was among them, even if they were not part of Israel by blood. And then Numbers 15, 15, 16, you'll see that we actually put that all over the place. There's we have magnets back there, and it's printed down at the bottom. This is the verse that really stands out for the church. For the assembly there shall be one statute for you and for the stranger who sojourns with you, a statute forever throughout your generations. You and the sojourner shall be alike before the Lord. One law and one rule shall be for you and for the stranger who sojourns with you. We are alike in the presence of God, whether you're a descendant of Jacob or not. And this is before Jesus. This was from the very beginning. This has been true. And then this last section, this one I think really nails it. This is talking about the statute of the Passover. Initially says, no foreigner or hired worker may eat it, which is interesting. But if you keep going down, it says, if a stranger shall sojourn with you and would keep the Passover to the Lord, let all his males be circumcised. Because circumcision was one of the very first physical signs of the covenant that happened between Abraham and Yahweh, which eventually got extended down to Jacob and Moses and all of Israel. So, if he lets all his males be circumcised, then he may come and keep it, and he shall be as a native of the land. As a native, so they're considered one with Israel. And there's an interesting person I want to talk about, which is Caleb. Caleb, he's an interesting situation because there's a couple different schools of thoughts on him. He is identified in all these scriptures as Caleb, the son of Jephunneh. Does anyone know how to say that properly?
Hey, whatever you said sounds good.
I'm going to call him Jeff.
Jeff?
Yeah, Jeff. So, Caleb the son of Jeff, the Kenizzite. Up here, Caleb the son of Jeff, the Kenizzite. Right? He is referred to as a Kenizzite. Now, who were the Kenizzites? Let's look down here. This is way back before Caleb. and Moses. This is with Abraham. Genesis 15, 18, 20 through 21. It says, to your offspring I give this land from the river of Egypt to the great river, the river Euphrates, the land of the Canaanites, the Kenizzites, the Cadmonites, the Hittites, all the ites. This is the land of Canaan. These were people that God had set up and established for destruction. And Caleb is a descendant of one of those? Here's an interesting thing, though. When they're getting ready to be sent out into the land of Canaan to spy out the land and determine if they could go in and take it over, Caleb was sent in, and he was referred to as actually from the tribe of Judah. So it's quite possible that Caleb's mother was a native-born blood descendant of Jacob. She might have been a Jew. But his father definitely was not. And so it's interesting that his father was allowed to come into Israel, integrate, and become a part of Israel. He was considered one with them. And not only that, Caleb was considered one of the greatest amongst the first generation that came out of the desert. Because that entire generation died, save for two people, Caleb and Joshua. He was one of two people out of the 600,000 men that left Israel that were allowed to actually enter the promised
This is
land.
very interesting because no one's ever spoken.
Well, when you come to this church, you're going to hear a lot of weird things you don't normally hear.
Not weird, just true.
Yeah, just a lot of different things you don't hear people really talk about. So Caleb, he was considered one of the greatest in Israel, and he might have not even been an Israelite. But he was allowed to come in because he partook in the covenant. He agreed to follow and keep God's law, become a part of God, and worship Him.
He was Israel.
He was Israel. He became Israel. Yeah. And then also, too, I don't know slides for this, but Jonah is a really fascinating story. Jonah ran his ministry and his prophecy shortly after the reign of Jeroboam, or around the reign of Jeroboam, shortly after that, which is right when the kingdom divided and everything got really screwy. But Jonah was commanded to go to Assyria, to Nineveh, which is the capital of Assyria. And they're not Israelites, they're not Hebrew, they're not anything to do with the blood descendants of Jacob or even Abraham. And so it's weird, why would God send somebody to a Gentile land to spread the word, to spread the law and teach them how to follow God if the law wasn't for everyone? See, it was given to Israel, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it was for Israel alone. And I'll talk a little bit about that here in a second. But yeah, Nineveh, and the craziest thing about Nineveh too is they repented. They repented and God forgave them, you know? Especially considering who Assyria is. Nineveh is, because Assyria was the country that destroyed Israel. And so it's just wild that this happened. And it makes me wonder, you know, we have this account of an Israelite going out and preaching to non-Israel countries, but it's one of the few accounts we have of that. I imagine that it happened a lot more than we have record of in our Bible. Because there's no way that's the only time. Right? Like, why would it be Assyria alone? Yeah, I imagine he sent it out to most countries. I don't know. Just food for thought. So, Israel, I want to go back to this previous... I think my notes are out of order. Hold on. Let's get talking about Abraham. That's what happened. I'm so sorry. Yeah, the covenant with Abraham. So these are long, these are big. Yeah, the covenant with Abraham, why it was given to Israel, right, and why Jonah took it. Sorry, let me reorient. I was under the weather last week, so I'm a little scatterbrained. Anyway, so yes, I think that the covenant was not just for Israel. I think it was made to be given to the entire world, to everyone who would hear it and decide that they wanted to become a part of God. But the reason it was given to Israel in the first place, and specifically to that people, is because that is the promise that Yahweh made with Abraham, because of Abraham's own faith and righteousness. He promised him, I'm God Almighty, walk before me and be blameless, that I may make my covenant between me and you, and may multiply you greatly. And then my covenant is with you, and you shall be the father of multiple nations. No longer shall your name be called Abram. Go on and on and on and on and on. And I will establish my covenant between me and you and your offspring after you through their generations for an everlasting covenant to be God to you and to your offspring after you. The promise was always that Abraham's descendants would be the ones who would receive the covenant. They're the ones that were chosen to take it, have it, and teach it. But they got kind of elitist at certain points, thought it was all just about them, when really it wasn't. So anyway, yeah, that has to do with covenant. So Israel, by definition, this is really important. I showed this verse earlier. This is when God was talking about giving the law to Israel through Moses. He says, now therefore, if you will indeed obey my voice and keep my covenant, you shall be my treasured possession among all peoples, for the earth is mine, and you shall be to me a kingdom, and shall speak this to the people of Israel. Notice that the condition for the covenant, because the covenant is an agreement. You do something, I do something, we're making a deal. The condition for the covenant that you will be my people and you will be treasured is not that you're a blood descendant of Jacob. It's you will keep my covenant, you will keep my law. If you will indeed obey my voice, it means do the things I say. Had nothing to do with bloodline. Yeah. And then not only that, really interesting about that too, because we see the other hand of this, not just people joining, but we see people being cut off from Israel because they won't keep the laws. Those people are completely cut off, kicked out, and it's because they're not even considered Israelite anymore in God's eyes. It's like, okay, you don't want to do it, then you don't need to be a part of this. There's examples of this. Any uncircumcised male who is not circumcised in the flesh of his foreskin shall be cut off from his people. He has broken my covenant. It's because of what he did, not who he was born from. Same here. Anyone that shall, this is the feast of unleavened bread. Anyone who refuses to remove the unleavened, they shall be cut off from Israel. Whoever eats any blood, this person shall be cut off from his people. You shall keep the Sabbath because it is holy for you. Everyone who profanes it shall be put to death. Whoever does any work on it, that soul shall be cut off from among his people. Yeah, and then this one, anyone who does anything with a high hand. So this passage specifically, I could have included the whole thing, but he's specifically talking about unintentional sins. When you accidentally sin, when you accidentally break the law, here's how you come and atone for it. It says, however, anyone who does anything with a high hand, as in has an attitude about it, doesn't care, and you're like, whatever. It says, whether he is a native or a sojourner and reviles the Lord, and that person shall be cut off from him among his people, because he has despised the word of the Lord and has broken his commandment, that person shall be utterly cut off, because they would not keep the commands, wouldn't listen. It has nothing to do with bloodline. It all had to do with, are you going to be my people? Are you going to do what I ask you to? Then you'll be mine. That was the whole point. And I love something that John the Baptist said. When John the Baptist was baptizing and preaching, preparing the way for Jesus, these Jews were standing there and they had this attitude about themselves that like, oh, we're saved by grace and saved naturally because we're descendants of Abraham. And so John the Baptist had this to say about them. Bear fruit in keeping with repentance, and do not presume to say to yourselves, we have Abraham as our father, for I tell you, God is able from these stones to raise up children for Abraham. If he can raise up children of Abraham from rocks, then there's no reason to think that he can't do it from us. And so, in conclusion, what is Israel? Israel is a people. And a lot of people think that we became integrated into Israel at the time of Jesus, but I tell you that Israel has always, from the very beginning, been those who are willing to listen to his law, keep him, accept him, and dedicate their lives to Yahweh alone. That's why Abraham was chosen in the first place. He lived amongst all these pagans, and he still worshiped Yahweh. Okay. So any questions? Yes.
I know that was at a certain time, and we're following the Torah here, and that's awesome. But I know Jesus came and died on the cross, so we don't have to do circumcision anymore, technically. And like this said in there, if you don't do this or that, you're going to be cut off. You know what I mean, right?
Yeah. Well, okay. I got a question then.
Sorry if that.
No, you don't need to be sorry. No, that's great. That's a great question. Why do you think circumcision doesn't need to be done?
Oh, well, I assumed that it did as a sign, but I didn't know if now that, Jesus came, I didn't know if maybe.
Yeah, see, that's what we're going to start talking about next week. I just want to establish who Israel is.
Yeah.
And no, we can talk about it a little bit now. I'll just be a lot more prepared for that next week. But yeah, next week we're going to start talking about what Jesus had to say about the law and what Paul had to say about the law and everything that stuff is. I know Paul says a lot of things about no circumcision, uncircumcision, and especially with the Council of Jerusalem, when they're trying to decide on what to teach the Gentiles, they said just to worry about not eating blood and staying away from fornication. And they're not going to worry about circumcision. But that wasn't a lifelong thing. That was kind of when you introduce somebody to something that's complicated and new and a lifestyle. You know, like with math, you're not going to instantly introduce them to trigonometry. You're going to, start with addition. So they're keeping stuff simple for them at that time. And so there's a lot of,
the 4 things that the council addressed were because those were major things in the Gentile nations at that time that were prevalent that they wanted them to stay away from.
yeah, not
It wasn't that they didn't want them to
things
learn
like
what
that.
the truth was.
Right, yeah, so, yeah, we'll definitely talk about that. I'll talk about that a lot, because frankly, people say, but Jesus said this, and Jesus did say a lot of things. I think a lot of people misinterpret it. Nowhere can I think of that Jesus says that we shall not do the law anymore. In fact, I've got a verse for you. Hold on, I have it written down. Give me 1 second here. I want to quote it exactly. Oh, okay, yeah. So this is Matthew 5:17 through 19. I don't have a slide for it, but I'll just read it really quick. He says, "Do not think that I've come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have not come to abolish the law, but to fulfill them." And now most people hear, oh, but you fulfilled them, that means it's done and it's completed. I don't think fulfilling something necessarily means it doesn't exist anymore. Like, I don't know, this is a weird take to have. But this is what he continues to say, because most people stop quoting him after this point. He says, "For truly I say to you, until heaven and earth pass away, not an iota, not a dot will pass from the law until all is accomplished." All. Him dying and resurrecting did not accomplish everything. There's a lot more promise that we have in the future. And heaven and earth haven't passed away. So, therefore, whoever relaxes one of the least of these commandments and teaches others to do the same will be called the least in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever does them and teaches them will be called great in the kingdom of heaven. So, yeah, we'll definitely talk about what Jesus had to say, but that's a good introduction to it.
And I just wanted to throw out a random fact, because
Sure.
a lot of the stuff that is like recommended, or not really recommended, it's the law. I've done some research on that, and there's definitely a lot of like health benefits to men having circumcisions, or like the food that you can and can't eat.
Yeah.
It's for your benefit, because like crab, for example, bottom feeders, they eat a lot of dead things, other stuff like that.
Yeah, no.
So
Yeah.
just because I grew up in that, and then I kind of strayed away from it, and then I started to come back to it, and I just started to realize just like the laws of the Bible, how they actually benefit our lives in so many ways.
Well, that was the whole point. God wasn't giving these laws to be like, oh, this is how I want things for some really weird reason. It was to teach them how to live the best way they possibly could. 1 second. Like today, the number 2 highest causes of food illness is shellfish and pork. And those are 2 things he very specifically said to avoid. And today we've got a bunch of topsoil erosion and problems in agriculture that are really going to come back to bite us soon. And he had all these rules about rotating the crops and how to take care of the soil, and it was so you could get the best crops and the best food. It wasn't some arbitrary thing. It was teaching you, this is how you live in the world I made. It was an insight and gift into how to make it easier on yourself, really. Yeah.
I just want to make a comment about when Christ said, "I've come to fulfill the law."
Mm-hmm.
If you think about it, he's the only one who has totally fulfilled the law. And I think that's what he meant, is he's the only one that has perfectly followed it. He didn't come to do away with it, but he was to be our example of how to live and to follow it. And we won't do it perfectly, but he's the only one that fully did it completely.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll have to think about that a bit more, because I know Paul said also too that through our faith we fulfill the law as well.
Yeah.
So,
We can do our faith, yes. We can walk in righteousness.
yeah, so Israel, yes, I guess I should specify a little bit better. Who is Israel? Yeah, Israel is anybody who would keep God's covenant and trust in Jesus as the Messiah, God's Son. Yes. Okay. Awesome. Any other questions or thoughts? I mean, anything. You don't need to be embarrassed.
Well, where I'm coming at it from all this is,
Yeah.
if you don't follow his laws and his commandments, your life is not going to be very good.
Yeah, I'm going to talk about that a lot in the next few weeks. Were you, do you come from a Torah background, or I don't really know?
Me? Me?
Yeah, you.
I was baptized as a Catholic as a baby.
Okay.
I did go to quite a few churches, but I never really felt comfortable, because to me, I just like everybody was preaching same thing or different. And technically what they were talking about wasn't technically coming from the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
Especially the Mormons. Didn't,
Yeah.
didn't God say, do not read out, or something about
Adding to
Don't
Adding
matter,
to
take
the
away from my
Bible?
word.
12, Deuteronomy 12, I think.
Deuteronomy 12. Oh, he said not to add to the commands.
Well, it wasn't another Bible because the book.
There's a verse in Revelation that says do not add or take away from this scroll, but that's speaking specifically about Revelation, because we'll talk about this too. The Bible didn't exist at the time they were writing it. It was all individual books and scrolls. There was no concept of the Bible.
But they didn't, they had the Bible and they had the Book of Mormon, but they never read from the Bible, they read from the Book of Mormon.
Really?
Even though they had both with them, the
Wow.
Bible and the Book of Mormon, they just kind of set the Bible aside in
Proverbs
service.
36 says, do not add to his words, lest he be rebuke you and be found a liar.
Yeah, so he's talking about the commandments there, God's word specifically.
Yeah, 4:2. Deuteronomy 4:2 also.
Yeah.
They only talked about the person that created the Mormons.
The Joseph Smith.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they
Most
never
generic
talked about
name
anything.
I've ever heard.
Yeah.
They never talked about anything in the Bible. They
Yeah.
carried the Bible, they carried the Book of Mormon, but they always set the Bible to the side and always opened up the Book of Mormon.
That's
Oh,
really
I'm
interesting.
sure
I've
the
noticed
Book
that
of
too.
Mormon never opened up the Bible.
Yeah, that's not good, no. You watch the two videos, and so you know that I don't want to hear any claims or arguments unless it can be backed up by Scripture. Because
Yeah.
that's the thing that we're going to work on.
So
A lot of people have a lot of preconceived ideas because of traditions that they've been taught in Protestant churches or Catholic churches even, and that we're going to have to try to undo a bit, looking
Yeah,
at
so I
Scripture.
had a lot of well, what's the real truth? You know, that's what I was seeking.
Yeah, everyone goes through that, and I mean, even just in the last few years, it's amazing how much my views have changed the more I've learned. So I'm wondering where I'm going to be 10 years from now, you know? So I know, but it makes me feel bad at the same time too, because I'm inevitably going to teach stuff that isn't true. And it's not because I want to do that, it's just I'm learning. And so I'll have to be doing a lot of retracting as we go through this. So yeah, that's totally understandable, you know, wondering what's true. It's hard to figure out, it is, because there's so much that's been changed and things that have been lied about and people misconceiving things, and it's just, yeah.
Yeah.
It's-
I will say, like, one other thing too is, just growing up, I was confused a lot. Like the church, they did read from the Bible, but it was always like, they chose specific things to really hone in on. And something that I read for myself was, if you seek to understand, pray about it before you read it.
Yeah, that's why I know with some of these sections, it's a mountain of text in verses, because I don't want to be able to take something out of context. I don't want to seem like I'm taking something out of context. I want the context to be there so it's very, very clear what is being spoken about. Because there are times in the Bible where people are being sarcastic. People are being sarcastic, or they're lying, or they're wrong. Yeah, Paul's sarcastic, and if you just take that little snippet without that context, you're going to believe the exact opposite point he was trying to make. Yeah, and then like the book of Job, like 90% of the book of Job is people arguing, and they're wrong. It's bad information, and that's the point. And you don't get that unless you get the whole picture. So
Because I'm not going to knock anybody's religion down, because that's their beliefs. But where do I fit in?
sorry, I missed what you said.
I'm not going to put nobody's religion down, because that's their beliefs. But I'm looking for where do I fit in, you know, so yeah. And, you know, it all boils down to all believe in God, we all believe in Jesus.
Yeah. I'm not trying to say anything bad about anyone else. In fact, I feel bad for most people. I do feel.
But when I was going over yours, when I was going over the information of your church on Facebook and all that,
Yeah.
I'm like, I think this is for me.
Well, I'm glad you came. Yeah. Yeah, I'm glad you came. Yeah, I'm hoping so. I want this to be a comfortable environment where people can ask questions, because that always drove me nuts. When I was younger, pastors, there are things I wanted to hear about, and pastors never talk about. You know? And with this more open format, you know, you can ask me about things that we want to talk about, and I can be like, all right, give me some time to research and make a prepared argument.
It's like I just now discovered who was Israel.
Yeah.
I mean, no, I never knew. All the times I went to church, never knew. Never knew.
Yeah, these things aren't really talked about. That's why I have to do things like define these terms between Israel and Jew and Hebrew. I don't feel like these are clearly defined for people a lot of time. You have to read a lot personally to get this very clearly painted. And it is important to read. Yeah.
I never knew who was Jews after, Israelite was after, or Hebrews after. They were actually people in the Bible.
Yeah, Hebrews, descendants of Abraham, descendants of Jacob, descendants of Judah.
Yeah, people nowadays, they just lump everybody as a Jew.
And it's especially so bad hearing like your rabbis talk. They'll be like, and Moses led the Jews out of Egypt. It's like, no, the Jews were a small part of that.
Rabbi? You heard of rabbi?
Yeah, well, he knows better. He should know better. That's purposefully deceptive. Yeah, it is bad. But
Was it Abraham that led the people out of Israel?
it was Moses that led them out of Egypt. Yes. Yeah. Moses. Yeah, and Moses was a Levite. So he wasn't a Jew. And then the term Jew gets a little confusing, conflated once the
And
kingdom
who's
splits up.
everyone else again?
Huh?
Who's everyone else?
So Hebrew is a descendant of Abraham, anyone who's a descendant of Abraham. So there's lots of countries that are actually descended from Abraham, aside from Israel, like the country of Edom, that was descended from Esau. And so they're Hebrew, but they're not Israelite or Jew.
They're Arabs.
Yeah, Arabs, yeah. Yeah, anyone descended from Ishmael? Yeah. And that includes a big part of Egypt too now.
Egypt.
Yeah. And so the Israels are descendants of Jacob, which is Abraham's grandson. And then Jews are descendants specifically of the tribe of Judah, one of the 12 kids.
So Jews are very little.
Very small group.
Very small.
But once the kingdom got divided and split up and fell, then the term kind of became a little bit different. Like you could call descendants of Judah Judahites, but Jews specifically, after the kingdom split, was the tribes of Judah, Benjamin, and part of Levite. So, for instance, Paul talks a lot about being a Jew or not being a Jew, and Paul himself is actually a Benjamite. He's not a Jew. So, well, not from the tribe of Judah. He's a Jew as in the citizen of Judea. Yeah, of the country Judea. So it gets a little confusing there, but I encourage you to read as much as you can. The more you read, the more you get a sense of the history. It becomes a lot more clear. But yes, these terms, they're important. Because there were different promises that were given to different groups here. There was a promise that were given to the Hebrews, and then there was a special promise that was given to the Israelites, because the Israelites were his people. The covenant was given to them, but the Hebrews, they were promised that their numbers would be as great as the sand, as great as the stars. And you actually see some of that with when Israel's traveling through the wilderness, when they're trying to get to the way to Canaan. They come to the nation of Edom, and Yahweh tells them, I'm not going to give you any portion of this land. Nothing that your foot can even cover. No, not a bit of it. And I believe part of that was because Edom was part of the child of promise. He was from the descendants of Esau, which was Jacob's brother. He was a Hebrew. So there are still promises and allotments to those descendants. Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah.
Food for thought.
Okay. Well, I'm going to get down from here then, and I'm going to float around so we can all talk or hang out, whatever. So, I'm going to pray really quick, if you don't mind. Okay. So, dear Yahweh, you are awesome, and I'm glad that we're able to gather together like this, and we can learn about Israel and your promise for anyone who wants to be a part of it. And please help us think about that and learn more as we discuss and go on through our lives. And amen.
Did you read anything?
No, I forgot.
Oh, also, there's more food if you guys want to eat more food now, and we also have Tupperware to take food home. So, yep, you want food? Take it. I'll be back.
I have a question.
Yeah.